scalable impact. And this can be through shared value creation, it can be through embedding ESG practices, etc. As we know, there's a lot of pressure organizations have been facing. Okay, I think the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that really short-term thinking about business is not resilient. We have to really think about more than just a shareholder-driven approach, but really think about how we take care of different sets of stakeholders. That's really what builds our ability to exist now and into the future. Just to bring it back home a bit, because we're in Kenya, but I know online, and welcome to the audience joining in from all across Africa, thank you. I'd just like to bring it home a little bit because we are in Kenya and the forum is happening for the first time in the business school in person. We know that the Nairobi Securities Exchange has issued ESG guidance for our listed companies. At the same time, the central bank has also issued guidance on
We know that we'll be defined by the chances we take, the people we meet, and the people we help. We believe the work we do matters. We know that everything we do today leads to a better tomorrow. We believe in our mission to serve society and shape the future. We are not afraid to face the unknown and conquer our fears. We know that without perseverance and commitment, nothing happens. We shake off the doubt and get back up when adversity hits. We don't fear failure because we know that is where all the lessons are. We don't give up and settle where we are. We go after it with all our strength and capacity. We show up and fight for it with all our tenacity. We know that tough times give rise to new opportunities. We are not most people. We are the leaders that break through barriers. We are the leaders that build the future. We are the leaders that make a difference. We are Strathmore University Business School. Join us.
Thank you very much, Mombi. I think think the little video has tried to share a little bit of who we are. But before I go into my short remarks, I would like to welcome all of you to Strathmore Business School. You are most welcome, you are most welcome, you are most welcome. If it is your first time, congratulations. And we always tell those who come here for the first time that it should not be your last time. So you're welcome again and again. I was very amazed by one of our guests from India. I thought he was here for the first time, but he told me this is the third time. But I'd like to really recognize the presence of all you distinguished guests, friends, and in particular, we have some particular individuals who have gone out of their way to be with us today from their busy schedules. I'd just like to mention very quickly, we have with us today T.K. Bernard, the CEO of Shift Impact Africa Group, very instrumental in organizing this with us at this venue. We have Amit Kapoor, the chair of the Shared Values India and India Institute for Competitiveness. He's a gentleman I met today who told me he's been here 3 times before, 2 times before, and I was quite amazed. He just arrived last night. He's leaving this evening to go back to India, so you can imagine the commitment. Amit, welcome. We have Pauline Bayer, a very, very close collaborator of Strathmore Business School and its programs. She's the executive director of the Stanbic Foundation, doing excellent work in many areas with various stakeholders. With us also we have Geoffrey Odundo, one of our Strathmore alumni, the chief executive officer of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, and a great collaborator in many initiatives here also. We have Joyce Gashungi Waweru, the CEO of PACPRO, doing very great work in sustainability in the area of plastics. Steve Kiptines, the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of Safaricom PLC, who is also one of our panelists. We have Rita Kavashe, a very decorated CEO in our landscape, the CEO of Isuzu East Africa. Karibu Rita. We have Barbara Jensen-Voster, Communication and Stakeholder Advisor for Projects in Houtrain Management Agency, here from South Africa, but also building a home here in Kenya. She told me earlier on today, she loves this country and she's building a second home here. Karibu Barbara. We have Kebur Gena, the Executive Director of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, I believe all the way from Ethiopia. Most welcome, sir. And we have Vuyo Lutseke, the Executive Director of Shared Value Africa Initiative, also based in South Africa. So welcome, distinguished guests, and all the guests who are here. You're all very distinguished. I could not name each of you by name, but you're most welcome. I believe we also have some guests online, so you're also most welcome. Karibu sana. We are here today for this CEO Connect forum. Very brief remarks. I have a few minutes. Apart from welcoming you, I just want to share with you 1 or 2 things in my brief remarks. Many years ago, in the 80s, as a young economist student doing what we then called A-level economics, I had a teacher called Mr. David Anderson, God rest his soul in peace. He was my economics teacher. And he gifted me a very interesting book at that time, a book that was published in 1973. The book was called Small is Beautiful, a study of economics as if people matter. It caught my attention because that is the first book that ever talked about a sustainable future, protecting the planet from an economic point of view. Neoclassical economics at that time did not talk about a sustainable future. But this is the first economics book that did. And in that book, the then editor of the Daily Mail, Mr. Peter Lewis, wrote a foreword to the book. And he said, the basic message in this book is that man is pulling the earth and himself out of equilibrium by applying only one test to everything he or she does. And that is money, profits, and scaling up of operations. Peter Lewis then went on to say, we have to ask instead, what about the cost in human terms, in happiness, in health, in beauty, and in conserving the planet? That was the question. That was the comment that Peter Lewis had. And when he talked about conserving the planet, we are talking about this beautiful place called the Earth, which belongs to all of us, which each and every one of us has a stint and a period and a time to be in. And this is the time we are in. This is our time. It starts and it ends. And all of us have a chance to be on this planet. The question is, of course, what do we do with that time? So the currently reality that we face is one that perhaps E.F. Schumacher in his book was trying to raise awareness about at that time. And that current reality that we seem to have embraced is the short-term view, where we focus on having more despite finite resources, where we talk about destruction of ecosystems resulting in disharmony and imbalance, where we talk about rising inequalities and loss of hope for the majority, especially the younger generation. And of course, we talk about fewer and fewer privileged few who continue to ignore the plight of the many, many who are existing and will come after us. The question is, for how long before collapse and chaos may happen in this particular reality? We need to move to a better reality. And it is like climbing a mountain where if we're to climb to the peak of the highest mountain in the world, called Everest, we have to take one step at a time. What can we do? Perhaps the phrase shared value talks about what we can focus on, which then informs what we can do. The time is now, and we have to focus, therefore, on sustainable business practices. We have to focus on purpose and not just profit. The late G.K. Chesterton actually made a very interesting statement in his autobiography, where he stated that the aim of life is appreciation. It is much less what a person can buy or have that matters than what he can appreciate that makes him or her a humanly rich person. I suspect in this room we are here because we appreciate the need for a better present and an even better future for future generations. In other words, a better world. We appreciate. And because we appreciate, we are humanly rich. We understand we are custodians, and we are custodians for future generations. As was mentioned by Charles Handy, another great writer, a leader needs a purpose beyond himself or herself to make the best of himself. This purpose is what we are here for today. And through this purpose, we will make the best of ourselves. Who shall do this? Of course, it is you and me, doing what we can, where we can, when we can. Wangari Maathai called this the hummingbird approach, where you can do a little where you are, when you can, whenever you can. In the time we have in history, I believe I want to emphasize this is our time. We are the privileged ones who realize that this agenda is important, and we therefore need to ensure that we are able to sell this agenda, to paint this agenda, to show others this agenda is important. With the leaders we have here, we are counting on you to carry on this mission in the time that we have. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a wonderful CEO Connect. I look forward to the deliberations. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mwangi. Very inspiring words. I think what stood out for me from what you've said is, I think historically we've often looked at sustainability, as something that we do because it is something that feels nice. Yeah, people do it as if it is a peripheral activity, whereas we're saying that if you really embed purpose, if you really think about how is our business going to survive now and into the future, you really need to think about not just profitability, not just economic growth. You really need to think about the community around you. You need to think about the environment around you and its well-being. So I think I would now like to go to the next part of the program and introduce none other than Tiki Bernard, who I'm happy to say is now actually a friend. Tiki is the founder and the CEO of the Shared Value Africa Initiative and Shift Impact Africa. Okay. The SVAI was founded by Tiki's passion and drive to make a difference, and the realization that business has the potential to do much more to accelerate the change that we want to see on our continent and beyond. Tiki, I'm so happy to have worked with you for all these years, since 2019. I don't know anybody else who is as passionate as you are about shared value and sustainability. And again, it is really our great honor to have you here with us today. Welcome. As Tiki comes on stage, I think we will also cue another video. Thank you.
What is it about Africa? Some see struggle. We see opportunity. This is where we thrive. Africa is a land of contrasts. Hundreds of millions of our people live without access to clean water and electricity. Yet we have more entrepreneurs than any other continent, and by 2050, half of the world's youth will be African. Africa's been busy. We're urbanizing, embracing technology. We're sprinting forward with some of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's time for African-driven solutions to African problems. It's time to seize the moment and create our own narrative to build the Africa we want. Business has the power to bring about change at scale and make money doing so. The shared value business model reconnects business success with social progress. Shared value is also about partnerships, building business networks that create inclusive growth. The power of collaboration should never be underestimated. If we can bring together businesses and communities from across Africa with a shared purpose, we can build economic value and, most importantly, value for society. It's time for Africa to become the economic powerhouse of the future. Become part of Africa's most powerful shared value business network. Join the Shared Value Africa initiative today.
Good morning, everybody. It's very good to be back at Strathmore again in person. We've been back online, but not in person. And really great to see, a lot of you here. I know we haven't spoken yet, but I recognize you in the audience. So I just want to say thank you, Mimbi, for that introduction. And I want to say to all of you, I stand in front of you today as a fellow African, as a shared value activist and advocate, and as the CEO of a Pan-Africa group, the Shift, as Mimbi said, Shift Impact Africa. So just a little bit to build credibility on Shift Impact Africa Group. It consists of two companies. The first one is Shift Impact Africa, which is an advisory and consulting arm that helps to build, and our focus is building business development in Africa. The Shared Value Africa Initiative is the advocacy and training arm, and as part of a global network, we take pride in our expansion into 15 African countries over the past 5 years. Our mission within the worldwide shared value community is multifaceted. We strive to inspire, influence, and aid companies in making transformative shift from focusing solely on profit to achieving profit with purpose. To us, true value creation is a holistic process, which isn't just about yielding shareholder returns, but about consciously considering all stakeholders. We firmly believe that a strategic approach to value creation and addressing ESG lies within the business management concept of creating shared value. Shared value advocates for profitably addressing the social and environmental issues that we face daily as organizations. By using this tool, we can address these challenges aligned to ESG requirements while creating valuable opportunities for all stakeholders. The principles and disciplines of shared value is about creating value for all, and as per the SDGs, to ensure that we leave no one behind. There are many global examples of organizations that are practicing shared value. There's not one, I think, that gets it, and Amit will bear me out on this, is that there's not one that gets it 100% right. But we have a really, really stellar example here in Kenya, which is Safaricom. So we, as an organization from the Shared Value Africa Initiative, for us, Safaricom is the Africa example of creating shared value. And it was the late Bob Collymore that said years ago, no company can continue to be successful if the community around you is failing. And that is still so true, you know, when we look at it from a business perspective. And today, our topic is about value creation for all. Without that, we cannot build a sustainable future. The value that a company creates for its shareholders is inextricably linked to civil society, to the civil society in which we operate, the human capital we employ, the environmental resources it uses and deploy. So we cannot separate that because it's in profit and purpose is inextricably linked. It is imperative for companies to look at how they manage the relationships and the dependencies between human capital, environmental capital, and social capital. And some, or maybe all of these, may be material for the sustainability of an organization. Each of our speakers here today, I want to say thank you for all of you being here. You were handpicked. So I personally hope that the conversation and thought leadership shared here today will make us all revisit our value creation as organizations, and as we as a collective have the responsibility, but also the opportunity to build the global future right here on the Africa continent. And let's go and do it, Caesar. So I want to say thank you again to all of you for making the time, and Mimbi, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tiki. I will always be inspired every time you speak. So I'm happy next to introduce Prof. Amit Kapoor, who is an honorary chairman at the Institute for Competitiveness in India and a professor of Stanford University. So, you know, you wear many hats. Literally, I can't manage to read all the affiliations you have because there are so many. Thank you for joining us, and most welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks, Tiki, for handpicking me to speak at the event. That's exactly what you said. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. So, you know, like what Caesar was saying, or what the Dean was saying, was something exceedingly important. And that's a fundamental thing that's happening in the world, and that is about that our climate is dying. If you really like it or not, the climate is dying, and it is quite likely that we as a species will be extinct in the next 2,000 odd years. I think we have to, one, remove our hats of thinking that we are the most superior species to have walked on this planet. I think we have to drop that arrogance of thinking that we are the best creation of God. I think leave that, because you're not. You are just one person or one entity who is in a transition in this planet or on this planet. It has a history of many billion years. It has a history of 13 billion years. And as Caesar was saying, you're here just for about a blip of time. You are just here for about 70 odd years or 80 odd years, and you will be gone. If you don't really take care of the planet, it is going to be a fairly catastrophic moment for your kids. They are going to have a hard time. What you're seeing right now is just a tip of the iceberg. What we have seen right now with the climate catastrophes that are happening is just very simple. Let me give you an example in terms of like how climate is going to affect the world. In a place like Asia, it is quite likely that about 1 billion people will be without water in the next 40 years. And when I'm just talking about Asia here, I'm not talking about Africa, the kind of challenges Africa will face, or what is going to actually happen to the ice caps, what is going to happen to the world in terms of like what is going to happen in US or Europe. But what we know is, for sure, it is going to be a fairly difficult moment for the world. The surface temperatures in the world have risen by close to about 5 degrees centigrade in the last 10 years. If you really look at the inhabitable situations that we are facing today, it is absolutely appalling. When you talk about a place like Death Valley, a lot of you have heard of Death Valley in the US and California. They actually say it is the hottest place on the planet. But if you realize, in a place like Delhi, we touched 123 degrees Fahrenheit last year. So that is just the beginning of how hot it is actually beginning to get. Because at 123 degrees Fahrenheit, what we are saying is that we are actually surpassing the level of human endurance. Because human endurance is also limited in terms of how much heat can we actually sustain. If you really look at the past 300 years, I actually started with this very important idea that we have become very, very arrogant. In fact, it actually is. It is the arrogance of ours that has actually driven the way we have actually driven things. We have become a very self-centered set of people. We have actually become a set of people who's looking at individual rationality, and we need to change that model. If we do not change that model of individual rationality, we will go to what we call as collective irrationality. Because today, what we are seeing in the world is all about collective irrationality. Moving ahead, if you really look at the changes that we are seeing in the world today, one is, of course, climate change, and just going deeper into the whole business construct of environment. What is climate change? What is pollution? Pollution is all about not using our resources right. Pollution is about underutilization of resources. Because we are underutilizing our resources, that means we are actually just, the efficiencies are low. The efficiencies are low, we are actually wasting a lot of stuff. So we need to change that. But other set of challenges that the world has actually seen, and especially in the last 4 or 5 years, there's something very important that has happened. One is, of course, what you call as COVID. COVID is something which has touched each one of us. I don't think there is any family in the world which has not got affected by COVID, by some way or the other. And COVID is something that exposes what is wrong with the world today. And it also gives us huge positives in terms of what is right with the world today. COVID is a very interesting example of how spread of disease can happen, how it can actually happen in a fizzy. The world was actually under the turmoil in less than 3 months. At the Wuhan thing, when the first case was found, to when it was actually across in every country in the world, it was just about 90 days. It was everywhere. The world went into a brutal lockdown and everything stopped. But of course, there's a great example of pharmaceutical companies in terms of how they created a worldwide association to really create something what you call as a vaccine. Of course, you will have people who would think that vaccine is something like oddball thing, not good, or whatever. Don't look at the anti-vaxxers. What I'm really trying to tell you here is that vaccine is something which happened through a collective effort. What happened in London laboratory, what AstraZeneca was doing, was something that came to India, which actually helped India quite a bit. In fact, India did actually share that vaccine with quite a lot other parts of the world as well. So a lot of you actually used Covaxin or whatever be the name of the drug that was actually there. So it was a global association that created it. It was a great example of how economics should actually work. It was a great example of how exploitative business models should not be. Because initially, the pharmaceutical industry was always being pushed into the corner and said that they're exploitative. But at least for the COVID vaccine, we have clear evidence the exploitation was not there. At least in India, we were able to give vaccine for $2 a person. That is hardly any cost. And that is the price that the government paid for it. It was not something that we were actually paying from our pocket. So that was important that actually happened. The other thing that has happened is the challenge of deglobalization. Deglobalization is something very, very deep-seated right now because it reflects on what is wrong with the world today. If you really look at Brexit, Brexit is a great example of what has happened to the world. Why has Brexit happened? Brexit has happened because it's a story of inequality. What Caesar was saying in the beginning about inequality, Brexit is about inequality because people in that part of the world started believing that they're being left out. They felt, if you really look at the corollary, or if you really look at this whole deep idea, there's something very interesting. the population which said that we have to be part of the European Union are the same set of people who possibly said that they should exit the European Union. Because they were young in the 1970s when the first referendum happened. And they were the same set of people who said that I need to be out of it. So what has gone wrong with the whole idea of globalization? The whole idea of globalization is that people have started feeling that they're getting exploited. We have got our business models wrong. And we need to get our business models right. Let me give you an example. In fact, when Tiki was talking about, say, something like shared value, what is shared value per se? Of course, there are principles of shared value that you need to actually look at. But we need to actually check out our heroes very, very carefully. Because the heroes that we talk about in the idea of shared value do not necessarily need to be the heroes. A very important example that actually comes to mind is somebody called Nestle. A lot of people believe that Nestle is one of the epitomes of the idea of capitalism or what is right. From my point of view, Nestle is a reflection of what is exactly wrong with the world today. For a simple reason, let me give you an example here. When you talk about coffee beans getting grown in Africa, what is the kind of money that actually comes to the African farmers? And what is the kind of money that goes to what you would call as the Nestle value chain? The money that comes to the African farmer is just about 7% of the total profitability or the total value add that actually happens. So Nestle makes 93% of the value add. Is that model right? Absolutely not. In fact, that actually creates a situation of the haves and the have-nots. The farmers will always be left behind. We need to change that model. And are there any examples of those set of models is a very important question. There are examples. Let me give you a couple of examples from back home in India. I do not know how many of you visited India, but let me give you 2 examples or 3 examples of what has happened there. There's a very interesting company called Amul. If you've heard of Amul, Amul is a milk company which collects milk from the farmers and distributes it across the country. There are other companies like that, like Mother Dairy, who are there, Nandini is there. So what they do is they actually collect milk from farmers and give it back to people or distribute it to the people. But you know, like somebody like Mother Dairy, it sells close to about 2 million liters of milk in a place like Delhi every day. But this is not where the story ends. The story is that 83% of the money that they collect on the retail storefront goes back to the farmer. And they're still profitable. So if any corporation actually comes to you and tells you that they cannot make money with the kind of exploitation and the models they've actually made is horrible, is absolutely untenable as logic. If you really look at the corporate salaries, the CEO salaries, what business does a CEO have to have a salary which is 1,000 times the multiple of anybody else who's the lowest paid employee in the company? We need to talk about that. Why should we not talk about that? All of you, all the CEOs here will actually feel disturbed when I say this. Right? But for a simple reason, this is a question that we need to ask. How do we distribute that income per se to all the people involved? Because the value creation happens somewhere else. Let me give you an example in terms of how exploitation can also happen. We look at the franchisee businesses in the world. And the franchisee model can actually be very, very exploitative. And when you talk about this whole exploitative model, it's very simple. A typical franchisee store who actually does, say, business worth $100 million in a year, his total income will not be more than 2.5% of the turnover. And I'm giving you about an example of a jewelry business. If that profitability is 2.5% at 100 million, his income is actually lesser than the CEO's salary. The person who creates the business on the ground, who actually goes out, employs about 100 people in a store, makes money less than the CEO. I have a question whether this is the right model or not. At least I can give you an example. At least in India, we are working on creating a policy. I'm actually writing that policy wherein we'll make sure that the profitability at the franchisee store level has to be maintained. Because the regulator will have to come through, because if you really say businesses are actually going to do it themselves, I've lost faith in them. Because businesses will not understand. Businesses are very short-sighted. Businesses don't talk long-term in many, many cases, 90% of the cases. I'm not saying that all businesses are bad. There are businesses which are good. There are businesses which look at long-term, but they have to look deeper. Another set of things. If you really look at another example, which I would like to share, and this takes us to a very important factor, and that is who are the players or who are the people who can actually create an impact? Is it just going to be the corporate sector? No. There are two other people or two other stakeholders who become exceedingly important in making a difference. Those two stakeholders are, one are the government and the other one are the not-for-profits. A lot of people underestimate the importance of these two enterprises or these two people. An example of how a government created a business model is something very interesting. If you know India per se, India has a huge tribal population. So if you go to a place like, say, Gujarat, which is one of the most prosperous locations in the country, it has a tribal population, and these women were not gainfully employed. They were just making something like close to less than $50 a month. So $50 a month as a tribal person, this is all that they were making. The government said, let's create something called as a mechanism to collect seeds from the ground. So they started collecting neem seeds. So neem is a tree which actually throws seeds and whatever, and they were collecting seeds. And there were about 10,000 women who got involved in collecting seeds from the ground. On an average, today a person or a woman makes something like close to about 80,000 rupees, that is $1,000 a year, to something like close to about $2,500 just by collecting seeds. And what do you do with the seeds? You started making oil, you started making soap, and those set of things. So you created a self-help group mechanism to actually do it. Can you actually create a model wherein I actually create tourism locations? One of the most important things in shared value is to actually create those tourism locations. Tourism is one of the most important. When you talk about Safaricom, that is exactly that. So how do you actually look at creating networks through telecom, through tourism, or whatever? So those are the set of things that we need to look at. Tourism as a multiplier is amazing. In fact, there was an interesting example in a place called Kevadia. You created a statue, close to about 100,000 people come to that, looking at that statue every day. It creates a multiplier for the local community. So how do I involve the community is the important issue. So when you talk about shared value, there are three principles that you would actually talk about. And those three principles are that we are going to reconceive a product or things. So how do you reconceive your product? How do you actually reconceive the solutions is an important thing. How do you involve the community is one of the most important factors that we need to actually look at. Involving the community is a very critical issue. And the not-for-profits under the sun actually do something very important. Because not-for-profits are some people who would actually fund some of these enterprises and say that as to how the world goes around. How many businesses are effectively, in fact, today businesses have to be forced to invest in societal ideas. Not-for-profits actually do it automatically, but what we need to do today is that businesses need to actually grow up and say that we will invest in societal things. And this is where the whole idea of capitalism needs to be relooked. And what is that relooking of the idea of capitalism? There are two principles. One is what you call as ease of doing business. Fair? This is what businesses will always talk about. Oh, this is the place where ease of doing business is good, we'll enter into this country. But the second thing is that what do you do for improving the lives of the citizens is an important critical factor. Businesses will have to get involved in improving the life of the citizens. And how do they do that? A very simple set of examples or numbers. When you talk about education, education is one idea where everybody can invest. Strathmore is doing something very nice, but there is something more that needs to be done. How do you scale it up? How do you take it to the larger set of people? If you really look at higher education per se, it is important, but what matters is what you call as foundational learning. What happens in schools? What is it that we are actually doing in schools? For every additional year of schooling after grade 8th, people start making additional money, which is close to about $500 for every additional year of schooling. So we need to invest there. We need to focus on outcomes at the school level. In fact, Tiki said something very important, or at least one of the videos said social progress. Businesses should get involved in terms of understanding what social progress is all about. In fact, what are the kind of opportunities that I'm actually creating? What are the kind of foundations for well-being that I'm actually creating? How am I working on those ideas is an important critical issue. If you really look at it, we need to measure social progress at all levels in a country, in all our communities. And that is where we should say we create solutions for those communities. Today, when you talk about small is beautiful, small is beautiful is a great example of how we should look at capitalism. I'm sure all of you know of a person called Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi, I'm sure all of you have heard of or know. From my point of view, one of the most revered people. I think a very, very startling thinker as well. But he made a very important statement when he was alive, that we need to create economies which are resilient at the local community or the village level. Can we do that? Large enterprises are good, but you will have to create solutions which are at the community level. Because if you do that, that is when you will actually be able to take care of your environment. You will actually make something which is sustainable, and you will do something which is far superior than what we've actually been doing. In fact, the other thing that I need to talk about, and the last thing here, I think my time's getting up, right? So 2 more minutes. We are entering into an age which is the age of anger. Everybody's angry right now in the world today, right? So how do we actually mitigate that crisis? How do we actually work together with communities is an important question here. What corporations can actually do? Can we shed? There is this whole debate that happens between left and the right, who's right, who's wrong, and those set of questions. The question is that we need to talk about humanity, not anything else. We need to talk about people. We need to talk about quality of life of people, and that is what the measure should be. The measure should not be input, but output and outcomes that we are able to produce. And as individuals, what is it that we have to do? As individuals, the question is going to be, each one of us in this room has to define what is the contribution that I make to the world rather than what others are doing for us. Because if each one of us learns how to make a contribution, the world will actually be a better place and a happier place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think you've challenged all of us. Do you guys feel challenged? Yeah. The contribution we are making. We need to end the pandemic of anger. Okay, so next we have another expert speaker and industry leader, Pauline Bayer. Pauline serves as the executive director and head of Stanbic Bank Foundation. She's passionate about building meaningful partnerships to drive forward socioeconomic growth, and her role is centered around spearheading key processes, systems, and initiatives implemented in the foundation. I'll just mention something which stood out for me as I was reading her profile. During her tenure at the foundation, she's been able to drive public and private partnerships through engagement with the government and its entities, including the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization and the Ministry of Health in Kenya. I think that really speaks to what Prof was sharing about the power of working with different entities such as the government and NGOs. Pauline, you're most welcome.
It's very hard to speak after Prof, but I hope I'll do some justice. But I think from where I sit, and greetings to everyone, what I'm going to share is a Kenyan experience. And I'll try and tie it to Prof's comments and what he has said. And I'll start with a trivia. One of the things Prof has said is that tourism is a connector, isn't it? How many of you know how many people participated in the Nairobi second edition of the City Marathon? How many? How many can guess how many people participated? It just happened last weekend. Actually 2 days ago, Sunday. 3,000? 5? 20,000? How many Kenyans in this room are runners? Let's see your hands. So over 9,000 people participated in the second edition of Nairobi City Marathon. How many people know how many countries were represented? I'm talking to the issue of tourism and the connection of tourism and something we had a lot of objection about, the expressway. An expressway that is now bringing Kenyans of foreigners coming into Kenya, less than 20 minutes. Taki, how long did it take you? 15 minutes to get from the hotel to the airport. Yeah? It took me 45. But the long and short of it and the power of the trivia, therein sits shared value. So Stanbic, and I'll say who I am, but Stanbic was started over 100 years ago Standard Bank Group owns Stanbic, started over 160 years ago. We are one of the financial institutions that financed the construction of the Nairobi Expressway. To most people, there was a lot of objection. To most people, it was a short-term view. It is taking tax collectors' money. We don't want more debt. And what happened? We are all in praise of the expressway. The expressway, as it is, as an entity, has brought together Kenyans in ways we never thought possible. What is this doing? This is shared value in practice. To a financial institution, we may just have seen it as another transaction. To the Nairobi City County, this is just another road. To Kenyans who own 3.5 million Kenya shillings, nobody would have thought that a road can connect somebody from Uasin Gishu to 3.5 million Kenya shillings. So what am I saying here? We need to start seeing opportunities where they are not seen. I believe Kenya has been living the shared value route. I believe it's a journey we are leading, but we need to see it as such. There are very many opportunities that we have that if we look at them with the lens of what's in it for everyone, we will see the shared value. I think my topic was very brief. Look at the responsibility as leadership to create value for all. I will not repeat what Professor has said. I actually am just giving examples here. And all in the shared value collective means if you're working with private sector, you need to speak about your purpose and how your purpose ties into your execution. How are you supporting your customers? How are you supporting your shareholders? How are you supporting your consumers, employees, government, as Prof has said, and the environment? Because a lot has been said about the environment, I'll choose to touch on what corporates are doing and give an example of one of our own. I will talk about Microsoft, who's one of the largest tech companies in the world. Microsoft is a supplier to almost all companies in the world in terms of we all use the Microsoft operating system. During COVID, Microsoft partnered with our institution to bring in digital skills into the continent. We looked at Microsoft beyond a supplier, and we saw Microsoft as a partner, as a shared partner who would help us drive the narrative. What have we done? We went beyond just partnering with Microsoft and said, how does this work for the Kenyan community? And what did we do? Through the partnership with Microsoft, we've been able to reach over 150,000 youth, provide skills. Some of these youth are now coding, earning $4,000. I'm just giving you examples of how shared value is in practice and how it is showing up. We have students from Nakuru, fourth-year students, sitting, coding for companies in Australia, earning $4,000. With Strathmore, we have a partnership where we are training a couple of youth, just learning from that experience, on how they can position themselves to be tech entrepreneurs and provide services to the world. So from a shared point of view and a shared value, we see a lot in what leveraging the power of corporates can do to protect the community. I think for me, the other thing I can give, and we did see this in action during COVID, and again here I will speak to the partnerships with government. I think Prof has mentioned this. I think when COVID came to Kenya, we all shut down. There's not much we could do. But what did we see? We saw the power of the corporate sector, and I'm sure Isuzu can speak to this, of coming together to support the Kenya government, do what we could not do, which was reach the common person in terms of COVID response. A fund was set up. That fund supported, one, the purchase of vaccines, the purchase of ventilators. From where we sit as an institution, we partnered with some of our corporate and investment banking clients. We managed to import ventilators from China. We donated, we actually almost doubled the capacity then. We donated those to the Kenya government. Again, it is leveraging the power of private sector to unlock opportunities. So going back to what I see as opportunities in business, again, Prof, you did speak to the one of reconceiving products. What are we seeing in that space? There is the emergence of fintechs, again, leveraging the tech platforms and all that. We are seeing market aggregators coming up as market disruptors, yeah? So somebody comes up, sets up a Jumia platform. Every farmer now can put their product on the platform. Thereby, you go around the middleman. We are seeing opportunities coming where they have previously not been seen. In our own space now, we have somebody sitting in Kisumu, has set up a market aggregation platform, is buying fish from the smallholder farmers, aggregating that and distributing that, and is now looking at an export contract. The second thing we are seeing in Kenya is that businesses are beginning to redefine productivity in the value chains. So the example of dairy in Kenya, again, is another one we can talk about. This is one sector that speaks to the farmers and speaks to empowering the smallholder farmers and speaks to a lot more that you can do in the dairy ecosystem. We've seen this also in the tea value chains. How do you work with all that? But an interesting one I would want to mention, given the work we are doing with government, is what we are seeing in enabling local cluster development. I think a lot of us have heard governments talk about export processing zones, special processing zones. Who are the people playing in that? Yes, you have foreign investors, but beyond foreign investors, the government and NGOs and private sector has initiatives that are being put together to look at how do I grow cotton, buy that cotton, put it in a special processing zone, have it processed not in Nairobi, but in the counties where it's done, and that generates value at community level. So from where we sit, what do we see in terms of strategy, in terms of the whole shared value discussion, is that private sector has a role to play. There is a lot. We just need to reimagine where the diamonds are sitting. I mean, the Moja Express is just one. Success does not come from an institution. So it is a road, but it's benefiting the rural communities. It's an initiative that is benefiting the rural communities. Again, what we are saying is that to be integral in the whole value creation journey, we are a believer in partnerships. It is the whole thing Teki loves calling the power of the collective. And there is an African saying that goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. So let's work together to empower the people at the base of the pyramid. That is where the opportunity sits. Let's look for the diamonds where the diamonds are unseen. Let's look for the rough diamonds. I think that's always my buzzword. The success of the person who won the marathon has catalyzed athletes from that sub-county that they want to be the future runners. Now that the government has decided to give an award for every marathon winner, we have attracted, I asked the question, how many businesses came for, how many countries were represented? I did see the Ugandan flag. There was a whole contingent just to come and run on the Nairobi Expressway. Tourism is a connector. So with those few remarks, I will end it there and just hope that the few examples I've shared can be examples that we can all emulate. But it is happening already. Shared values in practice in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. I think also what's very interesting is to see how foundations can also drive shared value forward and how you can create new markets. So now we're going to move to the second part of the program, which is a panel discussion, which I will moderate. So as I will introduce the speakers, and as I introduce them, please come forward and take a seat on stage. So we will start first with Joyce Gashugi Waweru, who is a shared value executive with 17 years of work experience gained from working from diverse institutions across Africa and the USA. She is also the CEO of the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization, PACPRO, charged with the responsibility of managing member organizations' post-consumer packaging through responsible consumption and production. Wow. Next, we have Stephen Kiptines, who is responsible for Safaricom's reputation management, public policy, legal and regulatory affairs. He is in charge of steering the development and implementation of Safaricom's corporate investment strategy, as well as overseeing internal and external communications. Then we have Rita Kavashe. As we were talking earlier, she also wears several hats. She is the managing director of Isuzu East Africa, formerly General Motors East Africa, which is the largest motor vehicle assembler in the region, selling a wide range of vehicles. We also have none other than Geoffrey Odundo, who is the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. He has over 30 years of work experience in financial markets across banking, corporate finance, asset management, securities trading, and market infrastructure management. Last but not least, we have Barbara Jensen-Vorster, welcome, who is a communication advisor on special projects to the CEO at the Gautrain Management Agency. She has recently retired from being the senior executive manager, communication and marketing at the same agency, a position she had held for the past 10 years. So welcome. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay, so I think as we start, it would be good to get some opening remarks from each of you, perhaps starting from you, just in line with the theme, value creation for all, a business imperative for sustainability. What has your experience been in Gautrain leading that, and what would you want us to learn? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the kind welcome. Gautrain is a unique animal in the sense of shared value, in the sense that shared value is in our DNA. Gautrain is a public-private partnership, so it is written into our concession agreement. We were, and I'm not sure whether we still are, the largest concession public-private partnership, and Standard Bank was one of our lenders. So on the African continent. So I represent the Gauteng provincial government, which was the public sector part of the concession agreement, and we had a public-private company. We still have them, and so in essence, that is a shared value model, but written into a concession agreement. And it sounds like an utopia, but it has to be very well managed, because you can keep a lot of lawyers busy for a very long time. And what this is, in essence, a concession agreement and a PPP, it is all about risk transfer and about where you allocate risk. But in essence, if you get this right, the community benefits. Because those of you that have visited Johannesburg and have got to Awatambo Airport and hopefully have used the Gautrain into Sandton, would have not, like some of you, had been stuck on the freeways into Nairobi from Jomo Kenyatta. It is 15 minutes every time into Sandton. There's no guessing how long it will take, whether it is 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon or 4 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, which is peak hour in Johannesburg. So ultimately, from such a public-private partnership, which is a shared value contract in essence, the community benefits. And if you are clever about it, what we did is we had a social investment project, money built into it. We said to as a government entity, we said that X% of the contract value should be allocated to a social investment fund that we administered. Which is shared value in essence, you know. So, and we started working with Tiki when she started shared value, the shared value initiative from very early on. And I always say, you know, shared value, and the Americans started talking about it very early in an academic sense. Shared value in essence is very African. That's the way we live. We are African. We live by being. We in South Africa have a saying, Ubuntu. We can only be ourselves by being with other people, and that is shared value. You know, we can only prosper if our neighbors prosper, and that is shared value, and that is how we've also been creating value in Gautrain for our shared value projects, the way it is.
Thank you, Barbara. Over to you, Geoffrey.
Thank you. So I'm from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We are the financial markets infrastructure in Kenya, outside the banking sector. We basically provide a platform, or rather platforms, for trading of financial securities. Primarily, we help you create wealth, but we also help businesses fundraise for their operations. We have 62 listed companies, and I'm in the company of our largest company, and to make sure he's healthy today, because that's 50% of my market is sitting with him. And we've been around for 70 years. Now, we originated primarily as really a profit-driven business, a profit-driven market. But around about 2014, we shifted that mantra to how can we create impact? And so we started embracing sustainability, and we joined the UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative, and today we are champions of sustainability, both in two fronts. One is promoting sustainability practices among listed companies, and the second is to provide sustainable finance opportunities for businesses. So under the first umbrella, we are driving and encouraging companies to adopt sustainability practices, especially ESG, not ECG. ESG is sorry. You see, they're closely related, aren't they? So ESG, and we issued an ESG voluntary disclosure manual in the market that is now becoming an industry sort of standard. It's open for everybody, both listed and unlisted companies, because just last week the International Accounting Standard Sustainable Board passed regulations, the first standards that are going to be now compulsory compliance to sustainable reporting. So I think for those companies that have adopted it, they are now sort of going to have an easier time. On the second hat, we promote the issuance of funding opportunities, that impact funding, and one of our classic examples was the first green bond we did for a company called Econ Holdings, which today is rolling out student purpose accommodation across the city. So we have that opportunity as well. Now, we work closely with Shared Value. Tiki has been our partner for many years, and because we believe that for a company to really survive, they have to be close to the community. They have to resonate with the community. You must share success, you must share value. And that's why we ask all companies, listed, unlisted companies, if you want to ensure that you are going to be there in the next 20, 30 years, list your company. We have to be aspirational. I don't know why Kenyans, we like small companies. So everybody here, I can guarantee you, has a side hustle. Who doesn't? You all have a side hustle, right? But it's not your main hustle. I think we need to change that mindset, because if you go to the US, and Prof can tell me, everybody starts a business with the dream to have it listed on an exchange, isn't it? Because what's the point? If it's your side hustle, it expires when you expire. So I think we need to change that thinking. Let's be aspirational. I have a platform for all companies, small and big, private and public. So sorry, I had to make a pitch. Thank you.
Well noted. Thank you. Over to you, Rita.
Yeah, so good morning. My name is Rita Kavashe. I'm the Managing Director of Isuzu East Africa. Isuzu East Africa is in the business of manufacturing, distributing, and supporting vehicles in Kenya. So we have our assembly plant in the industrial area. So I want to share a story, because I guess maybe the audience is thinking, how do we deepen the whole issue of shared value in our organizations? So I observed our employees work on a project. And the project was those who are from Kenya to build the mobile ambulance clinics for Beyond Zero. You know, you're familiar with Beyond Zero. So I observed my colleagues, the level of passion, the level of commitment. So I asked the project team, how come you are working on this program in so much love, in so much passion? And the members said, because we connect with it. We see the importance of this project in improving maternal health care. That actually this particular product will reach many communities that do not have, for instance, hospitals and clinics in Mandera and Lokichogyo and all these corners. So it got me thinking that actually our employees are looking for something deeper than the pay they take home at the end of the month. And I started to engage in a conversation internally. Our organization is known to do community work, but the way these individuals worked on that project told me there's need for our organization to create the right structures so that we can get the best out of our employees. So we looked at our own purpose statement, and we've talked about purpose today, and said, does it really communicate the aspirations of our own employees? We realized that we needed to tweak it a little bit so that we can bring in the whole issue of shared values in terms of providing solutions. We are not in the business of only making great trucks and selling them. Our employees are looking for something much deeper, something that they can connect with. So we changed our purpose statement, and we incorporated sustainability in our strategy. So we have our MTP where sustainability is a key pillar. We resourced it appropriately so that we can really be able to create the structures that are needed to be able to even in future measure the impact of what we are doing. So after that, then we allowed our employees to participate, because we knew that the ones who were going to drive, and already they had shown indication that they are looking for more purposeful work, not just miniature, so to speak, work. So we engaged them in designing what is it that they want to do, but they have to give their hours, they have to give their personal time, they have to connect with the environment themselves. You can get people to run projects and programs for you, but that does not really speak to you as an individual in terms of your personal contribution. So we created systems where our employees can actually go to the communities, they choose projects of their own, and we give them resources to be able to execute programs of interest, whether it is their own well-being, whether it is working with communities, whether it's creating mentorship programs, whatever project. And they give hours. So every employee must give hours, personal time, to go to the community and provide that support and service. And that way we found that the entire organization is so much driven in supporting us execute the projects and the programs that we have in place. So just in case you're thinking on how do you take this to your organization, this is how we observed, we saw the need, we created the system and the structures that are going to support us, and we involved our employees to be part of that new organization that is more concerned about impact and sharing our resources to impact society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. An interesting approach that it came, also from the employees, bottom up, but then you being aware of the need from a leadership perspective. Let's go to Steve. Perhaps you can share your remarks on the theme.
Okay. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's interesting listening to Dr. Kapoor earlier about the conversation about CEO pay. And I'm happy to report I'm not the CEO here this morning. But why that's relevant is because Safaricom is one of those companies that has in the past tried to have that conversation. And it's, I think, quite apt that we're having this today, Tiki, which is an anniversary, well, around about the anniversary of Bob's death. And Bob was one of those CEOs for whom purpose was lived, not just in the company, but in his personal life. So certainly uncomfortable conversations to have in the context of finding that purpose and shared value. One more thing before I go into my remarks, and I hope you're not counting this out of my time, but I was going to ask, how come the shared value on the How train doesn't allow us to have a drink or a meal on the How train? So the shared value is not quite there, but anyway, let me move on. But I'm also hoping my Securities Exchange CEO didn't have to have a heart check with his electrocardio reference. But okay, on a serious note, Safaricom obviously is the leading telco and technology company, and we're on a journey to become a telco technology company by 2025. Our value, economic value in the country is about just under 400 billion as at the end of our last financial year, which was March 2022, actually, the last year. Obviously, there's quite a bit that Safaricom has done within the context of shared value, but it starts with who we define ourselves as, and that is our purpose, so that our vision is to transform lives. And for us, transforming lives speaks to what is in our DNA way before we defined it or crystallized it in that fancy mission statement that is to transform lives. This started way back when Michael Joseph sort of was the original CEO of the company. And we transform lives by allowing people to connect to other people, to connect to opportunities, to connect to information, to knowledge, to things through the connectivity that we provide. And within that context, then, there are sort of 4 pillars in which we sort of work towards our vision. This is through shared value, through the planet or our environment, through running a responsible business, and also through our people. But the focus of today, obviously, is on shared value. So one of the things that we do in making sure that shared value gets out there, and we define, I think of shared value as taking our social problems, our social challenges, and converting those into business opportunities. So we have high unemployment, we have we have food insecurity, so insufficiency in our food, we have environmental degradation. So the thinking around innovation should be to take those social problems and convert them into business opportunities. So when we as Safaricom say we want to transform people's lives, it's not a flippant statement. We look into how can we change people's lives. And obviously, an example of how we've done that is through M-Pesa, which moved financial inclusivity in our country from a low of 25% to above 80%. And that in itself, it's no longer just a money mobile transfer business. There's a lot more that the platform is doing to share value. So, this is through additional products allowing people to save, additional products like credit. Obviously, we have, a Fuliza product that allows people, when you're at the till, you don't have sufficient money to complete your transaction, to do that. We have different products which even cater to the Muslim faithful, like Pesa Halal. So there's different innovations just around what used to be a simple money mobile transfer product that allows the company to create a platform that people can plug into in different ways. We have around about 295,000 agents across the country, over 500,000 merchants, and those are business opportunities. Those are small businesses that people are plugging in and giving them a chance to grow that side hustle, which, inshallah, can eventually go to the stock exchange and list. What he said, that, we're very conservative in our thinking. Side hustle should be scoped into what Facebook is today, into what the Googles of this world are. They started with that in mind. We're also trying to create, digital environments that allow people to plug in from an educational perspective. So there's a number of education programs that we have. The sort of broad themes that we use are around agriculture, education, health, and economic empowerment as well. So trying to make sure that the connectivity, the platforms, the solutions that we innovate around allow us to share that value and people to plug in from an educational perspective. I think one of the most amazing, because we have health, our National Health Service, obviously is very leaky, doesn't work quite well, is we have a solution that allows children from different parts of the country to plug into a health access with doctors from Gertrude's, which is our premier children's hospital in the country. Again, through connectivity. So we just provide the pipe, we provide the connectivity, and you have, a top doctor at Gertrude's who gives children in different parts of rural Kenya to access the same healthcare that my child would be able to access. So using our connectivity to give that kind of platform, I think, is really key to ensuring that shared value is maintained. So I'll conclude by saying shared value, I suppose, is also moving away from shareholder capitalism to more stakeholder capitalism, so that you're moving way beyond just the guys who put down the original capital or the money, to ensuring that there's a much wider constituent that you can speak to and make sure that they can feel the benefit. And ultimately, the profits do come. And I do know we have a couple of questions down the line, but I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Thank you so much for demonstrating how purpose has contributed to the success of Safaricom. Last but not least, we have Joyce.
Yeah, thanks, Mombi. Okay, so I'm Joyce Gashugi Waweru from PACPRO. Okay, you can hear me? Is it? You can hear me? Okay. So I'm Joyce Geshugi Waweru from PACPRO. We are the Packaging Producer Responsibility Organization. And a little context to who we are. In 2017, the government of Kenya banned plastic bags that we were using. And at the time, they were also thinking of banning the PET bottle, what we commonly use to drink our water, soda, or juice. And most of you Kenyans in the room, you're aware we don't have access to clean water. And so bottled water is actually almost a must-have in our homes. It's okay? Okay. Yeah. So a lot of our companies had invested, put in huge investments into production lines for PET packaging, largely to scale production for their water, juice, soda needs. And of course, at the time, a lot of them had also profiled the risk that government was likely to ban PET plastic in the country. And so at the time, some of these companies, multinationals, had already come together as a collective in South Africa to form an organization by the name PETCO, which really is the PET recycling company. And they've been able to grow their collection and recycling rates for PET plastics to about 1 billion bottles every year in South Africa. And so they came to the Kenya Association of Manufacturers here, and together they said, let's start a collective here in Kenya that can actually demonstrate that we can do the same thing here. And so at the time, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Environment, allowed for the formation of PETCO. And so for the last 5 years, we were operating voluntarily, which means companies were not mandated to take responsibility for their packaging. It was only those who felt the need or who understood it from an environmentally conscious perspective that actually chose to participate. So we started with about 7 members at the time. And then last year, just before His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta left office, he passed a law, the Sustainable Waste Management Act, which now mandates companies, manufacturers, brand owners of different packaging and products to actually be responsible for their post-consumer packaging, which means from later this year, it will be impossible for any manufacturer, brand owner, of products or packaging to actually put product in market without belonging to an organization like ours. Okay? Okay. Yes. So with that in mind, our members who had now grown to about 56 felt that we needed to create a fit-for-purpose vehicle that would then accommodate different packaging materials. So in the last 5 years, myself and a couple of other people, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we have pushed for government to actually make this mandatory. And we will now be having, there's a draft law, the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation, which will probably be coming into effect in September. So if you're a manufacturer here, a brand owner, I'm just giving you a heads up. You can see me after this. So that's my 5-minute pitch. But ideally, what this has done and why a lot of people at the time felt multinationals are driving this agenda, but we actually had a lot of local players. Some of our local companies, Bidco Africa, Kevian Kenya, you know, and Naivas Supermarkets, Quick Mart, Biofoods, Highlands, a lot of them actually are behind our success. And so at the time of us sitting together last year and now rebranding to Pack Pro, we were able to expand our portfolio, which means now we not only handle the PET plastics, but we also handle aluminium, glass, all plastic packaging, your paper, your liquid board packaging, commonly known as Tetra Pak here in Kenya, as well as anything that is non-hazardous packaging. What that has also done is it's driven up our numbers, significantly so in terms of our membership. So today we stand at about 300 members that we represent. And we expect by the time it's into effect, we'll have thousands of companies joining us. So why are we the only ones in the business? No, we do have a competitor. However, we definitely are the largest. But our success, and we're very proud to say this, has really been because we tried to create shared value. Waste management, for most of you in the room, you'll attest, is really an elephant. There's a lot of waste generated in our country, and a lot of counties, because waste management is actually managed at the county level, not by the national government, is actually not prioritized. When we talk about budgeting cycles, it's actually a third, fourth priority, or it's actually seen from a service, collect, dispose kind of model. And so for us, where we sit is to try and reorient government, business, as well as the collectors, to be able to create a model that allows us to create entrepreneurs, decent jobs for the collectors at the bottom of the pyramid, who are able to recover the recyclable materials and then trade this in to recyclers who we have contracted, which basically means today in our network of over 10,000 collectors that we have been working with, and there are hundreds of thousands out there, we have been able to transfer over 250 million Kenya shillings from the hands of manufacturers and brand owners directly into the hands of these collectors. What that does is a portion of that money goes into their national health insurance fund. Some of them are putting it into NSSF models, but more importantly, they have built cooperatives, which means they are able to then aggregate money, being able to develop projects together and be able to actually better improve their livelihoods. And so for us, that has actually been the most important value we've been able to create. But more importantly for the county governments is that we have been able to shift their thinking that waste doesn't have to be collected from the household and taken to the dump sites. One of our primary purposes is to achieve net zero waste by 2035 for certain counties. And in our modeling of this is to be able to create local infrastructure in different county governments where collectors are able to take their waste. A lot of our waste today that is generated is actually dumped in rivers. Even by the people who service your homes, you will be surprised because there's no accountability. And so for us, in terms of creating shared value, is how to transfer and unlock what private sector is doing by creating products and then transferring that into both the national, county level, but then through the collectors.
Wow, thank you so much. So I have questions, but I think for purposes of time, I'll open it up to the audience because I think people probably have burning questions for these speakers. So if we can have, at the back, people just taking a mic around, just raise your hand if you have a question. There are already some hands coming up. Okay. Let me first come to you, Edna.
Thank you so much, Mombi. My name is Edna Kimenju. I'm a ESG practitioner working at Deloitte, and my question is to NSC, particularly with the issuance of S1 and S2 just the other day. Are we looking to see jurisdictional adoption? And also in line with that, with things like CSRD coming, will we get to a point where the guidance that was issued by NSC becomes mandatory?
We can take one more. So that it's, there was this lady over here.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? To do impactful business in this country. So which led us as Extra Dimensions to kind of have our own initiative called She's Extra Route for Her that actually helps women to access finance. Now, My question is, and I think one of the things that we have also done through that is to challenge banks. Banks are fantastic. We cannot do without them. We need the finance to operate. But they also, to a larger extent, especially post-COVID, have really taken people to CRB. They have sold off people's property. So one of the challenges is that they don't see beyond what they can do with the entities that are not paying. So what I did is with KCB, we collaborated with the MD, the Kenya MD, Anastasia, and she had her first session with the ministry that had owed her customers who borrow from her. And she was able to get some traction. The ministry started paying them, and they were able to pay their loans, which meant she was not taking them to CRB or selling off their properties. So there is a lot of collaboration and shared value that can be, be on the table, and I think it's just about going further. So my question is to Gordon. You know this, I have challenged you many times. Many, many times. I think every time we have a conversation with you, this is what I keep on asking you. With the position you hold, is it not possible to bring these people to a table where we can actually make it mandatory for the banks to go after the people who are not paying the people who are borrowing from them? Is it not possible?
Thank you. I used to work for a bank. Okay, I'll start with the first question. So on the new standards, the Capital Markets Authority is currently looking at how to come up with regulations that will bring some level of enforcement on these standards. But of course, there's going to be a whole deliberation about them, public participation, etc., because that's a process that we have to carry out. I know ISPAC will also be looking at this so that they can see how they can be adapted into the Kenyan environment. However, these are international standards. You won't see so much deviation from them. I think it's going to be along the line. They're going to mirror. Because the ISS standards have to be standardized. Now, for the ESG guidance that we gave, this manual was developed using the Global Reporting Initiative standards, and I think that's what Scope 1 and 2 have also sort of adopted. There's so many different other standards, but there's not too much disparity about them. So I think companies that have already adopted the guidelines are going to find it easier. Because the guidelines are not standards. The guidelines is a manual telling you how to comply to the standards. So we're giving you the how. We're actually cutting off the cost of hiring a consultant by making it cheaper for you to do it. You can still hire the consultants because we need to earn something. But that's how we're going to do it. I want to tell you that I don't think we're going to have a problem in Kenya because over 30 companies are now doing integrated reporting. If you look at accounts that come out today, they're a whole booklet. Before you get to the financials, it's a story about what they're doing. But that's good, isn't it? I encourage you, don't look at the numbers. Look at what they're doing and see whether they actually that's evidence that these companies are sharing value, because there's a lot of stories in those booklets and very good pictures as well. So, yes. So I think it's not going to be a difficult problem for us. And companies are also doing sustainability reporting, which is also now even going further, getting in-depth, giving more information than they should, beyond disclosures. On the issue of helping our supply chain, one of the things we're looking at, especially around ESG compliance, is also how are you working with your supply chain, and organizations that are doing well on a standalone basis on ESG and the supply chain is suffering, then those are not really, the whole ecosystem should come together. So I think for the banking sector in particular, they have to go beyond. They have to go beyond by helping the borrowers through various initiatives to realize their payments. I know the hugest issue has been dealing with government on issues of pending bills, but I think now that we are seeing, there seems to be some work going on. But it's a very good challenge because at the end of the day, if you owe money to a bank, the banks are losing money through NPL losses. So they're losing profitability because they have to make provisions for them. Anybody who owes you money, if it's a company like ourselves, for any debtors that any debts that we have to also provide what you call ECL, expected credit losses. So owing somebody money is not profitable anymore because the accounting standards is trying to say if you can't pay, then provide. And I think that should be the way to do it. But I think what shared value should enforce is that good companies should actually be seen to be having smaller credit cycles, efficient debt payments, all that, so that you're able to be seen to be a properly impactful company. And I think that's what all this should be able to achieve. A good challenge, and I think I'll still take. I've been communicating to them, but I don't know whether they will still do more. We'll still do more.
Can I just?
I think I will use an example that we have been able to create with the school institutions, co-creating solutions with banks. Traditionally, those of my age, you contributed for the school bus in your school, and you left the school before the bus was bought. So, and you know, we were all looking forward. So what we did is to understand the cash generation cycle of the schools. When are they able to pay so that they can be able to borrow? So we went to the ministry, again, working with partnerships and collaboration to really create together a solution that was going to enable the school community to borrow and pay when they generate cash. And we created we solved a problem, but we created a huge profit potential for the whole industry, for those people who are playing in that segment. So I think there's opportunity to talk together so banks can be able to understand how does your industry, for instance, operate, and then working together to create those solutions. There's win-win in the entire value chain.
If I think you wanted to add as well.
Yes. It's going to add that the journey must be started of enabling the ecosystem. It is not going to be easy, certainly for us as Safaricom, making sure that we are addressing things like gender pay gaps, inequalities, human rights aspects. One of our fiber suppliers businesses is a female-owned business, and the lady who runs it trained as a journalist in school, and she used to do technology reporting. Very amazing story to how she ended up as a fiber contractor. But there's a lot of capacity building. So it really has to move from talking to enabling them. It might even require some level of affirmative action to give them a leg up. But for Safaricom, this is also very crucial that we're not going to compromise on the quality of the product, because obviously then you have a reputation checked. But giving those businesses, female-owned businesses, giving opportunity to the youth, important in order for them to build up. And this company I'm referring to is now, beta in the context of fiber contracting. we are hoping a lot more women can do. But there's also an interesting mindset because, you know, it's a technical profession, so to speak. So we're not seeing as many women being interested in that as opposed to, you know, supplies of office stationery things, which is okay, but it's not it. But the whole ecosystem has to come together. You have to start somewhere. Thank you.
Okay. Good to know.
Excellent.
Okay,
thank you for the clarification.
I'll open it up again, I think, last round of questions. Maybe we can have somebody assist us with passing the mic. I will come to maybe the lady at the back first, and then we can come to Susan over here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stella Nganga. I'm the Vice President of Startup Ecosystem at Freelancing System. We work with the African Transformation Office and try and get the support they need. Now, my question is, we have great, amazing minds and ideas that are coming, and they have great startups. But how do we get them to look at shared value as a business model? Because one of the main issues is, one, how am I going to get my supper? Yeah? Where am I going to get my rent from? How am I going to pay for my medicine? And for them, the main thing that they just look for funding. Yeah? And for us, we are trying to change that perception, because getting funding is not a solution, because if I give you funds and you don't know how to use the money, I'm going to help you. So how do we get our young people to start thinking of shared value? And by this, my side hustle is IT. So
yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Jorgen. My question is for Joyce. So I think it's wonderful that you've been able to bring private sector together around plastic waste. My question is actually on someone like me, the consumer, because I think that's where the complexity comes in, right? That I'm not sorting at home, and most of the plastic waste and stuff is me not doing it right, which then makes it more difficult for you. So from your perspective and the new act that's going to come into play, is there that role for the consumer? How would you engage the consumer? Because I guess we also have that shared value responsibility to manage the waste in our country.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Awala. I work with VSO, Voluntary Service Overseas. My question is around getting the small and medium enterprises and the micro businesses also thinking around shared value and looking at how do they really look at it as a strategic business move from the onset. Because a lot of these conversations are happening at the level of the large corporates, the big players in the industry. They're very easy to organize, but a majority of the businesses in Kenya are small, micro, very tiny entities that are really trying to find a space within a complicated global village. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I'd miss out. I'll make it quick. I'm inspired by all of you. My name is Arnold Gekonge from Champions for SDGs Youth, and especially Madam Rita Kavashe. Let me just confirm, it is Isuzu that assembles and makes buses, vehicles, and cars, right? So have you considered other sustainability initiatives like moving to electric vehicles and or hybrid, like the way it has already been done in other cities like Shenzhen and Paris that have moved to sustainable ways of transport? Because this is what will make sure that we do not pollute the environment and that we remain sustainable for our future generations. Thank you.
And how they think about sustainability and shared value.
So I would like first to talk about how do MSMEs look at shared value as a strategic business model. So I have a story from our context, and we really work with bottom of the pyramid business people. These are your waste collectors with the gunias, you know, moving from house to house. We do have an individual who started collecting waste that way. He was servicing homes. He did start off with a gunia, but then he was servicing one estate, you know, in Eastleigh, and eventually moved to Mkokoteni. This is a cart, and now owns 7 trucks. Okay. This is someone who has not gone to school, and he's been able to take his children to university. But why do I give his example in the context of shared value? When he started, he was able to ask every household he would service, how much waste do you have? I would like if you could separate this for me. And a lot of the houses were saying, we don't have space to keep 2 bins. And so what he did was to provide every home with a gunia. And these gunias he would get from factories that bring in sugar and other products for free, and then he would then distribute this to the different households. So what he was able to do is to get clean recyclable material, which means he was getting a premium when he takes these products to the recyclers. But more importantly, the households at the consumer level began to know that different materials can be recycled, because he'd come and he'd explain to them, this product is not good, it cannot be recycled. What that also did is that it shifted consumer purchasing behavior, so that more people now started being able to buy better products, okay? And so this is one individual. Now he has a company, and so of course he scaled his operations, but there are many models like that. So you have to look at shared value from an MSME perspective as what is the value you're creating for all your entire value chain. And I put it to you that the MSMEs that are actually adopting shared value is a big word, but when you break it down, is what is it that I am impacting across my entire value chain, from source to the very end and back again, to be able to harness, you know, what I am trying to put into the market, be it a good or a service. And so the reality is that those companies that are doing this are actually scaling faster. They're actually moving into the bracket where Geoffrey is looking at, you know, people who can go and actually list on the stock exchange. And when we have several companies, we can be able to give examples that have done that. To the question on consumers, the law will actually make it mandatory for consumers to sort their waste at source. So the next biggest business from next year is actually going to be the manufacture of dustbins, because every household is going to be required to have at least 3 bins, color-coded ones, a black one, a green one, and a yellow one. And the government is definitely going to be doing a lot of consumer awareness. However, organizations such as ours are actually also going to be doing this together with our manufacturers and our brand owners, because there's a penalty. An actual fee that is payable for not sorting your waste at source. And so the reality is right now we agree a lot of consumers are not aware that is coming. A lot of our consumers are unaware that there's even a law in place. And so the challenge that we have put to government is, just like they did when the plastic bags were being banned, we need to have a concerted consumer awareness campaign to educate consumers on what their responsibilities are with the new law.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we can go to you, Rita, the question on Isuzu and electrification of vehicles.
Yeah, maybe before that, there is a gentleman over there who talked about the SME's ability to be able to put in place instruments that will support in creating shared value for SME and small businesses. And I think responsibility for large companies is to also educate, support small SMEs in terms of understanding that shared value is not necessarily very expensive to start to create. As we've just had, it could easily be just a sack, but just having the right mindset that how are we engaging with the environment in a responsible way to create impact. So like people in manufacturing space looking to set up small manufacturing outfit, we bring them to our factory as part of the capacity building, because you need to start it early rather than wait. For instance, if you are in a factory and you are looking at waste, it's as simple as those bins to segregate waste, to look at your customers. Especially so, shared value is very critical for small companies because they don't have the marketing spend to spend in large advertising and all that. But the impact, the positive impact that you make with your customers, understanding that the customer is going to be there for the long haul, how are you engaging, how are you creating value, is in itself a big opportunity to scale your business as you've had. Going to electrification as a way to create less harmful products in the market, I think has been there for a very long while. And I think it started with the meltdown, you know, the economic meltdown in countries like the US, where consumers started to think, how are we going to engage in responsible consumption? For instance, you know, people used to run cars, very, very high-powered, high-engine rating and all that, emitting a lot of harmful waste into the environment. With the meltdown, people started to look, how can we be more responsible in the way we spend? And I think during that time, the automobile industry went through a major transformation in the sense that the consumer started to move from high engine power to very low, just enough CC rating to be able to take maybe someone from one point to another vis-a-vis the show large polluters of the environment. So there's a lot of manufacturers to really come up with less harmful products in the market. And for instance, in Kenya now, we are already discussing on the laws that we need to have in place to move fully into electric vehicles. The charging stations, you can see already we are powering. How are we going to maintain those vehicles? What are we going to sell? Is it the battery or is it the body? There's a lot of regulatory work that needs to be put in place as we transition. But as we are talking, many organizations are already testing the electrical products and working with government to have the right infrastructure to be able to charge. For instance, a truck needs to be able to hold charge for at least 400 kilometers, so that when you get there, you can either get a swing battery that will support your journey back or have a charging system and all that. So yes, indeed, our auto industry is going through major transformation to be able to support the improvement of our environment.
Okay, thank you. You have
just one. I wanted to respond to your question about how do you get the small SMEs to convert and look at ESG and sustainability as a key aspect. I think the one thing that you must remember is that the future is ESG. In the future, you'll not be able to get, any business looking for funding will have to have adoption of ESG standards. Will have to show that they're conscious about the environment and climate. So that's how you start getting that education in them. If you look at our manual, it's really a very easy manual to understand, so they can start, that can be the sort of the foundation to move it forward. And I'm happy to say that Kenyans are very adaptive to new things. We have just finished our discussion on our public participation on the finance bill, very aggressively. So we should start a new public participation on SDGs. And I'm sure we'll all start embracing it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have one final question for Barbara, and it has come from the gentleman over here. So you really have managed, in my mind, I mean, when we were doing the research and we learned about how train, this is an expansive public-private partnership. So when you're thinking about, you know, how to manage that collaboration, and also thinking carefully, and also about even how we share out the value across the company, the government, the community, you know, what is the ideal model and how do people manage this to the best of their ability to deliver?
It is bound by the concession agreement. So it took us about 14 months to sign the concession agreement, and in that 14 months the legalities of the concession agreement was tied down. And we live and die by the concession agreement. So whatever we do that's without the boundaries of the concession agreement is regulated by variation agreements, which cost a lot of money. It is a very large project to be a PPP project. But you find that within about a year or so, you find a rhythm, and there's certain things, especially within the shared value arena, and especially with the social investment, the corporate social responsibility projects, you find that you find projects that you don't have to do within that very strict regulations of the concession agreement. But for argument's sake, there's now I want to a very recent example, and the Kenyans will find a resonance with this, is we have a very huge problem in South Africa, as you do, with the pangolins that are being trafficked, and maybe you know or don't know, but pangolins don't eat in captivity, and that's why there's such a high mortality rate. So we have one veterinary hospital in South Africa that treat pangolins, a vet that can treat them, and she's in Johannesburg. So once they treat the pangolins to a point, our green scorpions fetch the pangolins when they find them, wherever they have been trafficked, and she treats them, and then when they are tube fed to a point where they can then go out and find food for themselves. But each pangolin has a pangolin walker. And then the pangolins are at the hospital up to a certain point, and before they are released in pre-designated areas where they are safe. So this is one of our shared value projects, the Johannesburg Veterinary Hospital for Wild Animals. And so what we have now in the winter time, now we've got many pangolins, and the ants and the insects go deeper into the ground because it's cold. So we have to find more space for the pangolins to go, and these pangolin walkers, because the pangolins have a pangolin walker, they walk for 3 hours a day. They have to go and walk in a safe area for the pangolins and for the pangolin walkers. We can't go and walk in any open veld next to the road, you know. So I had to get permission from concessionaire to walk in our depot area where there's huge grasslands and anthills for these pangolin walkers to go and walk the pangolins. It took them about 6 weeks to come to a decision whether we can come and go and walk these poor little animals. And there's no impact on the system. They're not going to walk close to the trains where the train runs. But it's all about risk. And will it come out that the pangolins are going to be in this area? And will it attract these people that's now going to come and poach the pangolins? So it's that kind of decisions. You think you do good. The poor pangolins don't have ants to eat. We've got grasslands where there's anthills. It took them 6 weeks to come to a decision because it's risk allocation. So...
And no...
I'm government, so so we own the system. We own the asset. It's 35 billion rand worth of asset. So I don't know shillings. Sorry, I'm very bad with money and transfer of money, as my boss always tells me. So we own the system, and so it is a and they contribute only about 10% when they build the system, but it's all about risk transfer, and that's huge. When we had sinkholes, during the operation period, all their risk that they had to fix. So and as Jeffrey would tell you, that's huge when you start negotiating, because they would like you, the government, the public sector partner, to take the most of the risk. We would like them to take most of the risk. So we paid for most of the system. We paid about 90% of the money to build the system, and we pay a patronage guarantee every month, a huge amount of patronage guarantee. So we pay a lot of money as government. And these systems across the world, you pay patronage guarantee, and Jeffrey would say tell that to you as well. Because all the rail systems in the world that's viable, governments pay patronage guarantee. The only system in the world that is viable by itself is the Hong Kong Metro. And they actually don't run train systems, they operate properties. And that is because government pays patronage guarantees. So that's why you guys in Kenya don't have it. It's hugely expensive. Hugely expensive.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving that lovely example, because, biodiversity, managing that is increasingly coming into the sphere of businesses as well. I think those in the financial sector may be already aware of that. But we are out of time. So I'm just going to ask each person 20 seconds, a closing remark, a call to action, given the discussion for today. Maybe we can start with you, then we move down towards Joyce.
In terms of shared value, there's that old African proverb, and you guys have the most incredible example of that. Someone mentioned Wangari Maathai. There's an old African proverb. The best time of planting a tree was 10 years ago, but we have to start now. We spoke about the state that the planet is in, and we are out of time. I've been going to the Masai Mara for 12 years. It's my second home. Every time I go there, I despair. And it's not only in the Masai Mara, it's all over the world. The lack of taking care of our natural resources. I look at it in the animal's eyes and I keep on saying, Polisana, Polisana. Those of you that don't talk Swahili, I'm saying to them, I'm sorry for what we are doing to you. The first time I saw Big Craig, Big Tim in Amboseli, and I took a photo of him. I'm a photographer. I put down my camera. tears were streaming down my face. And I looked into his eyes and I said, from the whole world, Polisano, because we're decimating this planet. And it's us for shared value that's going to make the difference.
Thank you.
Let me make this sweet. In 2050, 53 trillion dollars will be looking for impact opportunities. So I don't think there's any time to waste. All USMEs, 53 trillion. Can you fit in your calculator? So, and in addition to that, the largest investors globally are going to be investing only opportunities that are embracing ESG and shared value. So I don't think there's any time to waste. Let's start embracing it. Let's start embracing share value. Thank you.
Rita.
The businesses that we run today, if your business is anchored on purpose, that the purpose is to create value in community, environment, society, the profits are there. Today, I have deployed shared value in my company, and we've been able to move our share from 26% in 2010 to 53%, because our consumer, our stakeholder connect with the value that we are creating. In Africa, I think we need to elevate. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about that. There's still a lot of poverty in our communities, and Africa needs to get together and solve that problem collectively so that we can have a better voice when we engage with other stakeholders in the world. So I believe the 15 countries, we need to get to the 54 countries so that we can really have serious conversation in terms of how can we leverage our strength to create a sustainable Africa. Then we can take sustainable Africa to the world.
Thank you.
You have to believe that what we are saying is important. If you don't believe it, then it'll be tokenism. You will be reporting on ESG, even if Geoffrey decides to make it compulsory to list on the stock exchange to have ESG requirements. You'll be doing it to check a box, which will not work. You have to believe it in your heart. And this is not black tax. This is not you doing it because we live in Africa and we have to help our brother and sister. But you have to see where the opportunities are. And guess what? It starts with you as an individual in your home. It starts with you perhaps just harvesting water from your roof. You have to believe it. That's my message.
In closing, I think mine is to say that shared value is really how Africa can catalyze and really grow beyond what we are forecasting, to be able to harness the value of our people, our resources, our capabilities and our abilities. For a continent that has lagged behind for very long, I feel through shared value, because it's an entire value chain approach, it changes the way we do business, it changes how big businesses, small business and everyone else in between is able to engage with the value chain. We are able to catalyze ourselves and move forward as a continent.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Thank you, my esteemed speakers, and thank you for the audience for such an active, conversation. Thank you. We take our seats. Okay, so the last session that we have for the day is from Kebur Gena, who is an Ethiopian entrepreneur and current executive director of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Some of the delegates are actually here with us today. He oversees a unique organization, actually for our continent, representing our business and trade associations. Welcome very much, Kebur.
Thank you. My name is Kabu, and I'm currently the Executive Director of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And as a person who is responsible to bring African businesses' voice to government, shared value issues are becoming very important. And we've sort of listened today at the various activities that have been going on, and the activities actually shared value is leading in the continent. The whole issue is, from my perspective, is that the world is not really doing well. And so we need really to sort of address it in one way or another. For example, actually in trade issues, when the African governments set out to establish what they call the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the idea behind it is that I think we need to do more. Things are not really working the way they should work. And when the issue of ESG also comes to the fore, what we're saying is the world is not really doing well. And so the idea and the question that I would like to ask is, how do we redo or remake the world as we know it? I can't really find a stronger word, maybe there is a word, than redoing the world or remaking the world. I don't want to say creating the world, because the world is already there. But remaking the world or leaving it as is now, that's the question. And I think in many ways, remaking the world is not really that easy. There are interested parties that will make it very, very difficult, actually, to remake the entire world. We've been in this state for thousands of years. I'm not saying 10 years or 100 years. The model that we are sort of following is a model, although we've seen more or less actually certain revolution, like the agrarian revolution, the industrial revolution, and now the digital revolution. The basics are always the same. Private property, family, the state. We haven't changed much, actually, out of that ecosystem. And so if we want really to redo the world, we have to look at all these three entities. What we are trying to do, and what we seem to have decided, is that since it is very difficult, not difficult, practically impossible actually to sort of change this format, we've chosen actually to tweak it here and there. Because changing it, remaking it, may require a revolution, may require violence, may require an entirely, may require that we go through a very, very difficult period. And we may not even succeed after doing that. And so what we've chosen is really to stay within that limit and tweak it here and there. If we do this today, if a company X does this, if another one does this, if we come together and do this. If you've come or you've heard a bridge collapsing, one day, you wake up and the radio says, today at midnight a bridge collapsed. it is not that the bridge collapsed because something happened that particular hour or day. It's been going on for quite some time. Corrosion, no maintenance, perhaps a problem with the design, and no one has taken care of. And then one day it just collapsed, actually. And this is perhaps what we are facing actually today. We're not really sort of looking at what would save humanity. And as I said, to do that, it's not an easy feast. Being a person who is an advocate of business and a person who supports actually the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was signed in 2018 and which basically is trying to bring prosperity to the continent, what we're trying to do is really to fulfill the dreams of the previous continent's leaders in the 1950s, just after the independence. And so the idea then was to bring this continent together as one continent. It wasn't just actually to put up mechanisms to trade, but the mechanisms actually to bring the continent as one continent. And to share actually the burden and to share actually the benefits that this continent actually would bring to us. It is not really, I mean, people have a tendency to sort of say, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is really something, a copy of the European Union free trade system. But when you look really at the European free trade system, it just did not happen to promote trade or to bring trade, but really to sort of bring peace to the continent, because it was established just after the Second World War. And the idea then was, if France would sell its coal to Germany, Germany would sell its iron to France, and so on and so forth, there will be peace in that continent. The issue of trade came later. It's the same thing, actually, when those presidents or those African leaders in the 1950s established actually the Continental Free Trade Agreement. They had a bigger vision. They had a vision actually of bringing the continent as one continent, as I said. It has taken us something like from the 1950s to the 2020, 18 actually, when this signature happened. Something like over a half a century to sort of come together, at least realize that at least let's trade with each other. Let's start with that. And so trading with each other is not really also an easy thing to do, because there will always be a winner and loser actually in that game. And so in this continental free trade area, who will be the winners and who will be the losers? We have about 54 countries, and all the 54 countries cannot be winners. I mean, that's practically not going to happen. So what happens if only 6 or 8 countries only sort of win in this, let's say, in this ecosystem of trade? Would the other 40-something countries accept it? Very difficult, actually, to say, yes, they will continue accepting it. And so it requires more than that, and this is where perhaps the shared value would come in. We need solidarity. The CFTA would not work without solidarity, actually. If we have accepted the idea that we cannot really revolutionize or change the world completely and move out to another sort of system of governance, if we want to at least work on what we have today, not work on the impossible, but work on the possible, then we need really to realize and reflect on how to move forward so that all African countries will be winners. And this is where Shared Value Africa comes in. And I would like actually today to leave you with this reflection, and perhaps we can rethink of what that vision that would need to serve us all would look like. That is a reflection for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we are approaching the end of the program, but as is our tradition in Strathmore, and I think in many of our countries, we would like to give our guests a small gift, just a token of appreciation. So I will do this. I'll just call the speakers to the stage, and we can begin with the gift giving. So starting with yourself, Prof. Amit. Or you can help. Oh, thank you. Oh, no, but we have this whole photo opportunity.
So next, we'd like to invite Pauline Bayer. So, of course, a round of applause for her, please. And of course, we can't forget our wonderful panelists. So Joyce, please come on stage for a small token of appreciation. So next is Steve. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. So finally, I know you're wondering about the other speakers. They have been gifted. They have walked out with their gifts. So Mr. Kebur, please come on stage. Tiki, we'd like to give you a gift. Please come on stage. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. So last part of the program, it's my immense pleasure to welcome Vuyo Lutseke, who is the Director of Shift Impact Africa and the Shared Value Africa Initiative. Welcome, Vuyo. Oh, and we will also cue a video as Vuyo walks up. Thank you.
truth is, no other sector, private, public, or NGO, has the capacity to address the fundamental business and social challenges that we face today. And that is why collaborative and inclusive approaches to business and cross-sectoral partnerships are critical.
Hi everyone, great to be here with you all today. I have a very quick job in case you missed it. I'm here to announce that the Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit is going to be in Nairobi next year, in October 2024. For us, it's a very exciting opportunity to be here today to not only have today's session, and thank you again to all our speakers, but just to announce that, right, that we as the Shared Value Africa Initiative, as Shift Impact Africa, have so much pride and joy whenever we talk about the East African business community and how it contributes to creating shared value on the continent, how it's building sustainability, and how it significantly is changing the African narrative. So for us, this is our 5th year as SVAI and Shift, and we thought in planning for 2024, what better place to do it at? Come back to Nairobi, come back and celebrate and create a platform. But even before I get to that point, I was thinking about yesterday as we were planning for today's session. I was actually standing at this very spot talking to Rita from the Strathmore Foundation. I know she's here somewhere. And we were talking about, you know, creating shared value, the importance of it. The world is changing. Business needs to adjust to the change, adapt to the change, and create shared value. We need to find more opportunities to not just share, but also lobby and influence more businesses to do this across the continent. And the more we kept talking, we got so passionate and, you know, adapt or die, adapt or die, adapt or die. And we had to pause and reel ourselves back in, because it's quite a dramatic thing to say, adapt or die. But that's the thing about evolution, right? The world is changing. Business is changing, needs to change with the world. Business needs to respond, as Steve said earlier, look at challenges that are faced by society as opportunities for innovation, for profit, etc. So this adapt or die scenario, as much as it, you know, it scared even us, it's actually quite important, and we need to have that mindset of evolution from a business perspective in order to respond to our continent and in order to drive the growth, right, Africa's growth going forward. So an interesting fact about the Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit as well is the fact that it's actually even older than the Shared Value Africa Initiative, where it was way before my time. The very first summit was hosted in 2017 as an opportunity, a thought leadership platform, rather, amongst business leaders to, at the time, just introduce the idea and the concept of creating shared value and bringing together African businesses, right, all sectors and industries who were dealing with a changing world, and the powerful tool that is creating shared value that would be for them, right, if they really were able to engage with the business measurement strategy that is shared value. So they were able to have discourse, share learnings in one event, on one stage, and one platform, right? But as a result of all those conversations, then came the need not just for advocacy, but for uniting continuously as business creating shared value and lobbying and building a network of organizations that could together scale up impact across Africa by collaborating, knowledge sharing. And then the Shared Value Africa Initiative was born as a result of that, right? So the following year in 2018, that's when the SVAI was born. And for us already, this is an interesting demonstration of the power of the Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit, where voices and leaders unite with the same purpose, the same agenda, but also to cohesively come together and work to achieve this agenda. And for us, right, SVAI and Shift, this is why we continue to do the work that we do to bring all of us together as industries and organizations that are operating in Africa to continue this work. We are very excited with this announcement of coming back to Nairobi next year in October for the first time since 2019, as you saw in the video, where we were honored really to have the likes of the late Bob Kolumo take onto the stage and lend his voice to this movement, lend his voice to really the collective that we will bring and we continue to bring together. We look forward to coming back here and convening more sessions like today, but on a much, much grander scale, right? Grounding it here in Nairobi, grounding it here within the East African business community. We want to celebrate this community, highlight voices of business and all organizations in this community, your impact and trajectory in creating shared value, much like we have today, as I mentioned, because what the previous 6 summits, yes, we've been doing it for 6 years already, have shown us that this is a thought leadership platform, a lobbying platform on which together we can do so much more, because not only do we now understand why we should create shared value, why we should focus on sustainability, now we want to talk about the impact, the scalability of our sustainability strategies, of our creating shared value, and also create opportunities for partnerships as we do so. These partnerships, right, that we can create to further accelerate this impact as we journey towards the growth of the continent as a collective. I myself, as part of the SVAI team, I'm still around. I'm going to be very honest. We're looking for partners. We're looking for sponsors. That's my very quick pitch, that you saw what we could do today. If you don't know us, today you saw what we can do. We can do so much more, but we need support in order to do so. So we want to be able to come back with a bang, come back much bigger, and celebrate with you all when we're doing this, when we're showing Africa and the rest of the world what shared value in 2024 looks like from our perspective. So it's an opportunity to showcase how purpose-led businesses are driving the African narrative, so we can influence more businesses, as I keep saying, in Africa to do the same, and demonstrate how, for the world, how African business is solving for African challenges, living up, ultimately, to our responsibility as a community, driving action towards the Africa we want. So join us, please. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mumbi. And thank you to Strathmore for today.
Thank you so much, Vuyo. We are with you. Yes, we are there. Okay, so I'd like to then close this session for today. Thank you so much once again to the speakers. There are many people who are also working behind the scenes, as well as, of course, our dear guests who have joined in and participated very actively in the discussions. I hope it has stimulated our thoughts, as some people like to say, and our action moving forward. So as we close off, there is tea and snacks outside so that people can continue their networking, and those questions that were not answered can be directed. I still see some of our guests are here. So please take some time to have some tea, take some time to explore the campus. If you're a guest here, we welcome that. And finally, for the delegates who have joined us from the Pan-Africa Chamber of Commerce, your meeting is at 12 in Watamu Cafe, which is really at the left, my left-hand side, the left corner of this building. You will see a sign called Watamu Cafe. Once again, thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely day and afternoon. Bye.